Several minutes of commercial-free football starts now. Here are the Purple Mortgage Guys.
Hey, welcome to another episode of Purple Mortgage Guys. Joined on this episode with Goose, Tanner, myself, Brent. Three guys in the home loan business that love talking Vikings football. So we started a show. If you've not yet subscribed, I'm going to ask you to consider doing that. Leave some comments. We'd love to have them. And today, guys, we're going to talk about wide receiver 2, specifically where that player comes from. If we see that player on the team already and maybe in KJ, if it's going to be someone that we had a position we addressed in the draft, or if maybe it's a trade from another roster. And then lastly, if you see maybe somebody's still floating out there in free agency, even though it's been picked over a little bit here now that we're into April. But Tanner, we're going to start with you on this one. Wide receiver 2, Adams moved on to greener pastures, retiring down south in Carolina. What are we going to do to address wide receiver 2 in 2023? Where does this player come from? What do you got for us?
Yeah, kind of tough to figure out where the player is going to come from with where we're at right now. And I think Kwesi is playing it safe and kind of seeing how the draft plays out. There are some good receivers in this class, but I wouldn't say it's like super talented by any means. And there's probably 4 guys that are all kind of battling for that like wide receiver 1 spot in the draft. There isn't really a clear-cut favorite this year. I have my own guy that I would like to see the Vikings pick if they were to get a receiver in the first round of the draft. But there's 4 guys specifically. So Jordan Addison out of USC is my favorite. I think he's the best route runner in the draft. And I think that's one trait that always translates super well to the pros. I do think he is going to struggle with NFL physicality a little bit. He's going to have to adjust to NFL press coverage, and that is going to be a learning curve for him. But I think, getting with NFL coaches and working on his release, I think that is one area that he can definitely overcome and still be somewhat successful in the league. My count for him is actually Devontae Smith, who has been tearing it up his first couple of years in the league here. So I'd like to see them draft Jordan Addison, but there's also the other guys. Goose probably has maybe his own favorite as well, but Zay Flowers, Jackson Smith and Jigba out of Ohio State, and then Quentin Johnston are the other 3 that I could see the Vikings potentially look at in the draft as well.
Those are my same top 4, Tan.
Yeah, I think that's the consensus.
So is it draft then, Tanner, or is it is there a trade of some sorts, free agency? What's your preferred route to go here with wide receiver?
So at this point, it's definitely through the draft, but we all know that the NFL draft is just nobody has any idea how it's going to play out. Those 4 receivers could very well be gone by the time the Vikings pick at 23 as well, which is going to force your hand to potentially trade back. And if that happens, I mean, you have other holes on the roster that you need to look at taking care of as well. So if that happens, you have to look at maybe potentially trading for somebody, which is probably going to cost you a lot of money down the road. And then I would think that your third and last emergency plan would be to address that via free agency. There are a couple guys out there yet that are still super solid players that can come in and definitely contribute as a solid counterpart to Justin Jefferson, I think, next season if need be. A couple of those free agents that I'd just like to hit on real quick. One name he didn't play at all last year, and I'm shocked that nobody picked him up in free agency yet this year, is Will Fuller. So Kwesi and Kevin O'Connell have both made it pretty well known that they want to stretch the field more. They want to get a guy that's more of like a deep threat option. Obviously, we didn't have that with Adam. He's more of a possessional receiver. JJ can play all 3 levels, but I think that would really take a lot of heat off of JJ if you have the ability to have a guy that's a speedster that can stretch the field and then cause safeties to have to play back further instead of coming up and double teaming JJ and triple teaming him. So Will Fuller is a guy that is a pure deep threat. He's basically Deshaun Jackson. That's how he's made a living in his career, and I don't know why he hasn't been picked up yet. But that is one free agent name, and then another one that I'd like people to keep an eye on that hasn't been picked up yet is Jarvis Landry. Not necessarily a deep threat, But solid route runner, has been super productive almost every single season in his career. He is getting older. He is in his 30s now. But I think that's a guy could probably come in, catch 70-some balls for you next year, and be a solid contributor if you can't find a wide receiver 2 in the draft or via trade.
Now, just to make sure we're getting you straight here, when you're talking about in the draft, you're talking first round or so let me play hypothetical scenario. Someone like, I don't know, Bijan Robinson drops in the first round and he's available. And maybe someone like Tanner would say we should select him. Then what do? You've blown your first round draft pick, or maybe they select quarterback or trade up or something too for their QB. You don't have that first rounder invested in a wide receiver. Then what do you do?
That's a solid question. So there are a couple guys in the draft, a couple of receivers as well that I think can still be a wide receiver 2 option. But I don't know if most of those guys are going to get past the second day of the draft. And we have 2 picks in the first 3 rounds.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one of the biggest concerns right now is you're almost forced, unless you trade back, you're almost forced to grab a receiver with one of those 2 first selections. But you do have a couple guys that are going to be second and third round players like Josh Downs out of North Carolina. Tyler Scott out of Cincinnati is also a deep threat. Count for him is actually T.Y. Hilton, somebody I can stretch the field. 10 of his 14 career touchdowns were from 30-plus yards in college. So that would be a solid pickup as well, I think. Tank Dell out of Houston is a guy that can stretch the field as well. He's incredibly fast, but he has 21 drops over the last 2 years. And then there are a couple guys that I really like Cedric Tillman out of Tennessee and Marvin Mims out of Oklahoma as well, who ran a 4.38. He can also stretch the field. But like I said, it's just all depends on how the draft plays out. I mean, if you have a guy like Bijan Robinson, I think that falls to 23. In my mind, that's the best player on the board. And I just don't think that you should let talent like that pass by. He's one of those.
You might want to check out our mock draft if you've not already done so. If you're still listening here. So
1 in every 10 year running
when
back.
you say I had a lot of drops, my mind, you lost me on that because I went back to Troy Williamson and I couldn't recover quick enough to get the rest of your comment. Goose, how are you addressing wide receiver 2? Do you agree with Tanner? Is he full of crap? That might be a different question, but what's your take?
Yeah. I agree. Option 1 is ideally the draft. I doubt that all 4 are gone by 23. I actually think there might be a few guys left at that spot, mainly being the consensus with this wide receiver class is there's a lot of probably like solid wide receiver 2 guys, maybe not a ton of stud wide receiver 1, day 1 guys that are coming out of the draft. And with premium positions like quarterback, almost certainly having 4 go, there's always going to be a bunch of edge rushers, corners. I just think that there's going to be some guys that slip that you probably don't expect. I think Quentin Johnson is, I think I saw he's maybe the Vegas favorite to be the first to go, just from his measurables alone. And then I wouldn't be surprised if Smith and Jigba was taken ahead of him as well, just with his Ohio State background and his production. So I think those 2 guys are gone by the time we're up. But that would leave us someone like Jordan Addison. I think if Jordan Addison is available, really like Tanner said, I'm intrigued by route runners that, like Tanner said, that seems to translate the best. He's had great production. He really helped Kenny Pickett become a first round draft pick. His size concerns me a little bit, but I think there's a big history of small wide receivers having success in the NFL. And I think KOC's creative enough to kind of move him around and kind of help him stay off of press coverage. I had to try to remember quick what press coverage was when Tanner talked about that, just because I haven't seen it in so long. But I think I go Jordan Addison. If I have to think backup plan, if there's a big run on corners, I would feel like I might have to go corner round 1, just where that that depth chart spot is at right now. I would be looking at, I think the Vikings are in a mostly win now situation. And so whether that's looking at future draft picks, moving some of our current players that, whether it's Daniil, Delvin, Zadarius, I'd be looking at packaging some of those players and maybe future second, third round picks to either acquire more draft capital to have probably 2 picks in the top 45, 50 to try to get 2 starters in the draft. Or you start calling around on wide receivers that might be available. One that Tanner and I have talked about, but what I don't think we've talked about on the podcast is there's rumblings last year about maybe the Vikings being interested in Jerry Jeudy when they were kind of thinking about blowing up the team there. High upside guys that have shown flashes. He's like a higher upside situation to like a Jalen Reagor, first round draft pick. He's had the production though. It's just it hasn't been a great spot for him.
Hurt all the time too.
Yeah. Injury concerns. But I think I would be looking at kind of a half reclamation project, half Kwesi's shown that he's going to be like a bet on a guy's upside, a young player who maybe hasn't reached his full potential, and we're betting that Keenan McCardell and KOC can pull something out of him.
Like the more we talk about the draft, the more we're going to miss that second round pick that we don't have for being flexible and going best available.
Yeah.
So you guys, in agreement, I guess, best available wide receiver first round, unless somebody falls that's unexpected. That's maybe the direction we lean.
Yeah, I think so. I think one thing we also haven't talked about yet at all, and I think a lot of it might come from just because the fact that there hasn't really been any steam about the Vikings like signing a receiver. I know they went to like Odell Beckham's workout day in Arizona and stuff, but maybe, just maybe, the team actually plans on KJ Osborne being the wide receiver too. And then there's a guy like Jalen Naylor that they expect to really step up in camp. I think that seems crazy to me, but
yeah, we didn't even talk about KJ.
It does just seem kind of strange that there wasn't a lot of rumblings about them going after a receiver in free agency. And it doesn't even really feel like we've heard a lot of like buzz about them meeting with like receivers and stuff at the combine. So I'm just kind of intrigued by that, but maybe it's a smokescreen too. I mean, it's a chess game. So
KJ took such a huge leap in year 2 that I had such high hopes for him last year.
Everybody did.
And when it didn't really come to fruition, it made me nervous about trusting in it. I'd like to think that he could still reach another level and take the opportunity without Adam there. But we'll have to see. All the conversations that I'm hearing, including when I was thinking about this, is it seems like Jalen Naylor, KJ, like the only current roster members that we talk about. Maybe there's a chance that with a full season under Jalen Reagor's belt, working with, like, I kind of forget that he was a pretty last minute addition. And once you get to mid full season form, there's not a whole lot of time to like, let's bring this guy up to speed. And so maybe a full training camp, OTAs, working with Kirk and KOC in the same system another year. He's got the athletic tools. He was drafted in the first round for a reason. I'm a little surprised that, one, I kind of forgot about him, and two, that no one's really talking about him. It's all KJ, Jalen Naylor. I'd like to think that Reagor's got to have maybe one last shot of like, dude, this is it. Like,
remember him? He was not running the right routes there. I don't remember what game that was last year, but there's some mental aspects of it.
Colts
too.
Or Giants? Oh, it was the Colts because Kirk had
two
pick sixes. They're both on it.
Yeah, it was the Colts. Yeah.
One other name that we didn't talk about, and I don't think this really affects anything, but the Vikings did sign Brandon Powell, who is like Jalen Reagor.
Mhm.
Like they're like the same skill set. And
Yeah.
it just like that
Seems
signing
weird.
like didn't make any sense to me at all because they're both like return guys, gadget guys. And
He's a better returner, right? More
I don't know if
reliable.
I don't know if he is better than Jalen Rager. I just thought that seemed super weird. Like you're adding competition at like your punt return spot. Like
Yeah.
go get a guy that can like be productive on the field. I guess it seemed super stupid to me. But
Tanner, when you mentioned Jarvis Landry, that's a name that I hadn't really seen. Like, I don't think I knew, which is bad on me, but I don't think I knew that he was just a free agent out there.
Yeah.
Like, that sounds like a.
yeah, he has like no steam or anything. I don't think he's met with any teams. But I mean, he is kind of at that point in his career too. I feel like once guys are like in their 30s, like their early 30s, the draft goes through, and then there's all those holes that weren't filled in the draft, and then that's kind of when those guys fill those spots. You know, I think like Ndamukong Suh has been like one of those guys in the past that's been in his 30s, and he'll just end up signing with the team to fill
I think
holes.
he's
So
30 on the dot, so should have a year or two in him. He's got an LSU connection with JJ. I mean, if you could get him on a cheap veteran contract, I would take that all day long.
another guy that's a free agent, I think he's going to end up with Aaron Rodgers, but like Randall Cobb. He's
Oh, come on.
33, still super like productive. I feel like as a slot receiver, it might be a waste of money at that point, but
Yeah.
there are some names out there still, guys that can still be productive.
So just to recap, dressed to the draft early, trade, free agent, KJ is kind of like plan C. Hopefully
Plan D.
well, then you got Goose bringing up Rager is going to step up. So at that point, we're going to be
gross.
open.
Well, you hear all this stuff about how good of a coach Keenan McCardell is.
Yeah.
I mean,
You know, players don't even matter.
You coached up JJ. Like, congrats. I want him to take one of these guys that has a ton of ability and
like turn him into something. Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree. Yeah.
All right, there you have it. Leave us some comments. Let us know what you guys think on wide receiver 2. Who's it going to be? How do they address it? And who do you want to stay away from? The Randall Cobbs of the world, or maybe someone even a little bit older. I don't know if that exists in the NFL, but give us some comments. Give us some feedback. Love to hear what you guys think. And we will be back again before you know it. Have a great day, everybody.